After Tyson Foods announced it was ending operations at a beef plant in Lexington, Nebraska, one of the largest in the nation.
Have been hit hard by the pandemic, forcing suppliers to scale back production. And now the impact on the meat supply chain could directly impact shoppers.
For 40 years, the story was simple. Canada makes, America buys. Everyone gets rich enough to complain about something else. Then Donald Trump walked back into the White House and slapped a 25% tariff on almost everything crossing the border from Canada. Not a targeted measure, not a limited dispute, a blanket tax on one of America's closest allies. And whether he meant to or not, Trump may have just done something historic. He might be the president who pushes Canada out of America's orbit and into Asia's. Tonight on Huge Press Room, we're asking a brutal question. Are Trump's 25% tariffs actually forcing Canada to choose Asia over America? You're watching Huge Press Room. If you want more deep dives on Trump versus Canada, trade wars, and the real power games behind the headlines, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let's get into it. Let's start with the numbers Trump doesn't like to talk about. For decades, roughly 75% of Canada's exports went to one customer, the United States. For oil, it was even worse. Over 95% of Canadian crude exports flowed south through pipelines into U.S. refineries and tanks. That dependence gave Washington enormous leverage. If a U.S. president wanted to make a point, all they had to do was threaten. A tariff on cars, a quota on softwood lumber, a review of national security on energy. Canada would panic because the math was simple. Lose access to the U.S. market, and you lose your main customer. Trump knew that. And in his second term, he decided to weaponize it. He declared that fentanyl and illegal migration from Canada and Mexico were a national emergency, used an old law meant for wartime, and dropped a bomb on the relationship. 25% tariffs on almost all imports from Canada, 10% tariffs on Canadian energy that didn't qualify under USMCA, with the threat of going even higher if Canada didn't cooperate. On paper, this was about drugs and the border. In practice, it was about power. Here's the question no one in Washington seems to really ask. What happens if your favorite supplier decides they don't want to be your favorite supplier anymore? That's exactly what Mark Carney started asking the moment those tariffs hit. Very early in this trade war, Carney said something that sounded small at the time, but changes everything if he means it. The era of Canada deepening dependency on the United States is over. Not we'll ride out this storm. Not we'll get a better deal. Over. And then he laid out a specific target. Canada will double its non-US exports within a decade. Double. Not add a few side deals. Not sprinkle in a little diversification for optics. Double. You don't talk like that unless you've accepted one thing. The old model, sell everything to America and hope they stay nice, is dead. So if Trump is pushing Canada away, who's waiting with open arms on the other side? Asia. Start with China. Despite years of tension over Huawei, spies, and detained citizens, China is still hungry for the things Canada has. Energy, minerals, food, high-quality industrial goods. Then add India, a massive growing market that wants energy, fertilizers, and tech. Then Japan, South Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, all countries looking to reduce their own dependence on China or Russia by diversifying suppliers. Carney has already started moving. Restarting trade talks with India after a deep freeze, joining Indo-Pacific groupings that Washington doesn't fully control, sending ministers to Seoul, Jakarta, Hanoi to talk energy, critical minerals, and manufacturing. Quietly reopening some doors in Beijing that were slammed shut a few years ago. On its own, that's just diplomacy. But when you put it on top of Trump's 25% tariffs, another picture appears. Every time the U.S. taxes Canadian goods at the border, it makes Asian buyers look more attractive, especially when you combine it with Carney's most controversial move of all. A plan to build a new pipeline to the Pacific and ship up to 1 million barrels of oil a day directly to Asian markets. Normally, talking about a Pacific pipeline would sound like standard Canadian politics. Alberta versus BC, climate versus jobs, indigenous rights versus resource companies. But in a Trump trade war, that pipe suddenly becomes something else, an escape route. Right now, U.S. refiners can count on a few things: Canadian crude coming in at a discount, existing pipelines that make America the default destination, a neighbor that doesn't have many alternatives, add a Pacific pipeline, and those assumptions start to shake. Picture the world after that line is built. Tankers leaving BC ports full of Canadian oil for China, Japan, India, long-term contracts denominated in dollars, or maybe you and Asian buyers who suddenly have a direct link to a democratic, relatively stable energy supplier that isn't Russia or the Gulf. In that world, when Trump says, "We'll put a 25% tariff on your energy if you don't listen," Carney can say, "Okay, we'll sell more to someone else." That's not a bluff anymore. It's a real option. The 25% tariffs don't just hurt today's exports. They give Carney the political cover at home to take the enormous risk of building that pipeline and deepening ties with Asia. He can point at Trump and say, "You see this? This is why we can't keep living on one customer. This is why we have to pivot." Of course, this is not a simple America bad, Asia good story. Every new market comes with strings attached. China has a long track record of using trade as a weapon. India plays hardball on tariffs and access. Japan and South Korea are tightly tied into U.S. security guarantees. If Canada leans too hard into Asia, it risks swapping one kind of dependency for another. Instead of worrying about a tweet from Washington, you start worrying about a policy shift in Beijing or a currency crisis in Delhi. Instead of dealing with one big familiar partner, you deal with a messy, competing set of regional powers. But here's the key thing. Trump's 25% tariffs have already broken the psychological barrier in Ottawa. The idea that no matter what happens, the U.S. will ultimately treat us as a special ally is gone. Once you've been hit with emergency national security tariffs, told you're a drug threat, and used as a punching bag in an election cycle, it's very hard to go back to business as usual. Even if a future president lifts the tariffs, the memory will stay. They did it once. They can do it again. So is Trump forcing Canada to choose Asia over America? Not in the sense of signing some formal, "we divorce the US, we marry China" document, but he is doing something arguably more powerful. He's making Asia look less risky by comparison. Because if you're sitting in Ottawa or Calgary or Vancouver and you ask, who is more predictable over the next 20 years? A chaotic US that can slap 25% tariffs on us overnight, or a diversified mix of Asian partners who desperately need what we sell? The answer is no longer automatic. That's the strategic damage. Trump's tariffs may or may not bring back jobs to the US. They may or may not reduce fentanyl. They may or may not win him another election. But they are teaching Canada a brutal lesson. Depending on America is dangerous. So here's where we are. Trump has used 25% tariffs to punish Canada and show his base he's tough. Carney has seized that crisis as the excuse to pivot. Trade missions to Asia, plans to double non-US exports, and a pipeline meant to send Canadian energy west instead of south. Asian economies are more than happy to see cracks appear in the North American partnership. In 10 years, we might look back and say, the moment Trump tried to squeeze Canada with 25% tariffs was the moment he pushed them into Asia's arms. Or we might look back and say, Canada overplayed its hand, Asia never delivered, and in the end, both sides crawled back to the old model. Right now, we're in the middle of that story, so I'll leave you with this. Is Trump really making America great again by taxing Canadian goods at 25%? Or is he quietly writing an invitation for Asia to move into what used to be America's backyard? Is Canada betraying its best friend by looking across the Pacific? Or simply doing what any country would do once it realizes its best friend is willing to use it as a political punching bag? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you want to see how this all connects, check out our other videos here on Huge Press Room, Carney's Pipeline Revolt, the mega project meant to break Trump's energy leverage, the Reagan ad that made Trump terminate all trade talks, Taco Trump, how Trump always chickens out, but still wrecks the border economy, and from best friend to 51st state, how the relationship hit rock bottom. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of Trump versus Canada. Thanks for watching Huge Press Room. I'll see you in the next one.